your point. So now I'm trying to figure out how do I grade this on a 100-point scale, which I guess shouldn't really matter, but for some reason, I feel like instead of students having to choose maybe 4 options, A, B, C, D, now they, how do I do it with a 100-point scale? So,
right.
My principal suggested maybe I just go with the highest, number, and being like still having that traditional teacher piece still in me from so many years.
Mm-hmm.
And I give a 100, but then the other side of me is like, well, does it really matter? It's kind of what it represents. So I didn't know. I was wondering, do I do that, or do I just let the kids pick a number? But then I worried if kids picked numbers and then what if they compare and then they're not happy with I don't know.
So like I have a bunch of things. First of all, everything you are thinking and feeling, I went through the entire time I was doing this. Even after I had done it for a long time and knew that it worked, there was still a part of me that was so deeply ingrained in the old system of thinking that, like, doesn't matter what kids say. And I mean, we were fortunately on an letter scale, so I had a little more flexibility, but then you have the pluses and minuses, and what do those mean? And what do the kids say? Like if they think that they are mastering something, but in your gut and from their work of what's been displayed, that's not exactly what you've seen. And then have that battle back and forth with, does it really matter? And if it really doesn't matter, it's more important that they can articulate what they know and can do. Right. I have to kind of relinquish control of the fact that, this isn't a precise science, even when we're the ones putting the number on it.
Yeah, I think you're right. For so long, I've been so curriculum focused, and I'm starting to realize that it's not just curriculum. It's really about teaching them how to learn. And I don't think I was doing that for so many years. I was just focused on, am I hitting all the standards and doing all the things that I'm supposed to do in the curriculum that, like you're saying, if they can articulate their learning in a way that they feel they're at a certain level, I mean, I guess they're learning, and that's the point.
Yeah, that's the point. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's a very hard thing. How long have you been teaching?
This is year 21 for me.
So yeah, like you've been doing it that way for such a long time, plus add on your own learning experiences in school, which were that way. And it's so deeply ingrained in how we're taught the system of school, the game of school happens, that, to undo that and then also have to kind of rectify with your colleagues and with the kids and their parents that this system is somehow better than the one that's been functioning for hundreds of years at this point. So
right, it definitely has been a journey. I was a more traditional teacher, and then I started to work on engagement with a coach at school. And so I would have them for that day or those couple of lessons, but then it was always back to playing the points game. So I read your book, That Hacking Assessment, and I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do, but I wasn't like brave enough to do it. So I kind of held on to that for a little bit. And then last year I tried standard-based, and that was a step in the right direction. But I quickly realized that there's so many standards. You can't possibly do it all. And like you said, not everybody might get to that point where they mastered everything, but yet they've shown growth. And it felt wrong to be putting numbers, even though they were just 4, 3, 2, 1. I noticed very quickly, even if it was a formative assessment, kids just stopped because they were like, well, I'm at a 2 right now or 3, and that they almost like, even though I would try to reiterate, the 4 is not an A, and 3 is not a B, that's still what happened.
Yep.
So switching this year to finally doing it points it's working, I think. I'm just doing all feedback, and people are taking good assignments. So, your fear of what's going to happen if I don't give numbers, I'm doing it.
I found it to be so hard, even after, like I said, I had established some routines. iTunes found that the 4321, and I apologize for I don't know if you could hear how loud it is on my side, but the 4321 quickly became the same as A's, B's, C's, and, not there yet. And so like I tried to change what I was putting in the communication system to not even remotely resemble what they were used to. Like E was exceeds and M was meets and A was approaching, and then, not yet was essentially, like just nothing was submitted. It wasn't zero. And I had gotten in touch with our communication system people, their software people, the help desk, and was like, how do I reset this so that, there isn't a calculation of percentages when I put any of these letters in, and I don't want to average, because I was able to do like by standard, give them one of those delineations with the standards. I was like, I don't want to have to put an average to hold the space, which the system required. So we came up with putting that in as a G. Like, so these are all letters that have nothing to do with, how kids traditionally think about their learning. And that was just a placeholder. It said, yep, this has been assessed. Please, look through the different standards that were specific to the assessment. It had its limitations because I couldn't do different standards for every kid based on what they were working on in the system. When I set the assignment, I had to choose usually as many as I wanted. So what I tried to do was choose like 3 to 5. And if kids were working on different standards, just put in something that went with what they were working on as well as what we were working on, and leave blank the ones that didn't fit or don't even put it with the assignment. And ultimately that ended up being the system. And then I had to explain it to parents and then re-explain it to kids over and over again. And it was still not perfect, but it was better than what was happening before.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a constant process of thinking. One thing that kids said to me, and I don't know, maybe you have a better answer than ones that I tried to give, but some of them still felt, and I guess it's because of the system, like panicked, but I still don't know where I am. And like, I'm willing to talk to them about, their progress and what they've done. And that's kind of my answer. And that usually does make them feel a little bit at ease, but some still at the end of the year last year felt like they didn't like not knowing where they were.
On the traditional scale.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what you might want to do is, as much as it goes against everything that you're trying to do and unlearn yourself, you might want to co-construct with them like a conversion table of mastery based on, what it looks like in the 1 to 100 scale, based on how many standards they've mastered. And like there's not going to be a scientific way to do it where it makes sense. And you should just be real transparent about that. Like, I'm doing this because I know some of you really need it. And I hear you saying that. And I want to honor the fact that this is something that's important to you. However, we're not even going to think about that until June.
Right. And I guess like what you're saying is, because I have carved out time each week for them to revisit those goals, I guess they could for themselves give it a number at that point, right?
Yeah.
If they wanted to. I don't know.
I mean, the only other thing that I could really think of is if you have exemplars of student work that exemplify each one of the standards that you're talking about, and you really help students understand what, why they're successful, and they can articulate that, and then they can align their own work with that of the exemplars that you're showing them and the criteria that you established together based on those examples, and have them all the way from, okay, if this is mastery, this is proficient, this is approaching, and they could see that there could still be strengths in that approaching one, but it may not be all of the, whichever standard that you're looking at that time. so that they could see the range of what that could look like. And then you say to them, well, how would you improve this so that it would be mastery or proficient if it's at that A level? And how can you identify that yourself when you're looking at a peer's work or your own work? And just always have that iteration of understanding that learning is this ongoing thing that shouldn't be labeled, because it changes so quickly. And sometimes we regress. You're doing something really well for a while, and then something you submit isn't the best quality work that you've submitted. And it's not that you lose the learning that you had before, but on that one specific assessment, you haven't demonstrated your best.
Yeah, that's why I really struggled with that standard base, because I felt like for some people, they were on grade level, which was fine, and they weren't exceeding it, which was fine, but it felt, I don't know, it still felt to them like, I don't know, that they weren't, I guess they were equating it to the traditional scale. Do you know what I mean? Like sitting at that 3. So
yeah, and 3 is the hardest one to transcend, because that's grade level, essentially. That's your on grade level. And I always found that giving feedback to those kids who are on the higher end, especially as a 12th grade teacher, and you're using graduation requirements as the mastery level, right? Like, how do you push them to the next level in an AP class in 12th grade when these are the standards that you're working on? And you have some kids who are tirelessly working. The effort is so clearly there. And even in your head, trying to get past am I grading the effort, or am I grading, or are we assessing what is sitting in front of me, regardless of how many times it took them to get there?
Right. Inflate it either.
Right.
Like part of me was like, I can see that you're working so hard, but I can't, it's not here yet. It doesn't meet this description yet. So I did like when you said, I don't know when I was listening to you talk about, or you said it's not that your approach was more, it wasn't standard, it was more of like showing that growth, and switching my lens to that has really helped, I think.
Which I think is why baseline stuff and portfolio is so powerful in this method, because they could see the growth themselves when they look at their September work versus their October, November, and then, obviously the widest gap between September and June, or May, if you're on the East Coast, you end in June too. Like that gap of time where they've had a full year's worth of instruction, and they could see a full year's worth of growth and what that looks like. And it's always the backward sort of planning. Like I would say to my 12th grade students, at the end of a year, you're going to write a 12 to 15 page research paper in a college library. And they looked at me like, there's no way I'm writing a 12 to 15 page paper. I'm like, no, you'll do it. And it's not even going to be as hard as you think by the time we get there, even though, right now you've never done anything like that yet. And they knew what the bar was going to be in June, May and June, knowing that after the AP exam had finished, they weren't finished. That's where we were headed after the test. And I think it made all the pieces moving up to that point make sense. Like that's why the first paper is 2 to 3 pages, and the next one is 3 to 5, and then solid 5, and then 5 to 7, and then 7 to 9. And then it was about building stamina with their reading and their writing. And over time, they were able to see that all the crazy business I was talking to them about at the beginning, right. And they could articulate it too. Like I'm sure you've seen some of the videos that I have of them talking about it. Like that first semester conference was a lot of my questions.
Right.
They came prepared, but I was the one that was digging deeper. By the second or third time that we did it, I started asking a lot less questions, and they came prepared. And by the end of the year, I had to ask very few questions.
Right.
Because they knew what the expectation was, and they had practiced so many times.
Right. I think you're right. When they get to the end, they can see it. And I always try to say, like, there's a method to the madness, like, but they just have to trust you, I guess, in the beginning. But having those goals, and you're right, and backward planning makes everything make sense.
Yeah. Do you have students still in your building who were in your class last year who could attest to the experience? No, you work with seniors too?
I do, but nobody's in school right now. So the kids go back in November, and then we go to a hybrid model. So
Gotcha.
The first marking period, kind of on my own, but that's okay, because I know it'll work. I did it last year with standards. Even better, I think.
Could you enlist some of your former students that you still have relationships with to do like 1 to 2 minute testimonials of some of the things they struggled with and how
I
worked?
could try. I did, like, in my opening letter, I did take some statements that students put in my Google form for the end of the year, and put some of what they thought about it in there. So that's certainly a good idea.
I think kids really listen to other kids, and I know that because I taught mostly 12th graders, when the kids would come back from college for Thanksgiving, we always had a feast at our school and we invited them back. And they would come to talk to my AP classes and attest to the fact that it sucks when you're a senior to be in Saxton's class because she expects you to do so much, but it really does pay off when you get to college and you're so much farther ahead. And no matter how many times I said that to them,
you're right,
it just didn't resonate the same way as having 15 kids stand in front of them who they knew from, right before they graduated, who are now in colleges across the country, saying the same exact things that I had said. And even with my journalism kids too, when I would take them to conferences and they would hear the same instruction at the sessions they went to from other teachers and other speakers, and they'd be like, Miss Saxton, they said, like you said, that this is how it was. I'm like, funny how that happens, right? That we're all saying the same thing. I'm glad, we're not having conflicting messages at the very least, but sometimes in your own space, you don't really hold as much ground until after.
That's true. And then do you have any, like, when they're setting goals for themselves? That's the other thing I was kind of wondering about online. I had them, like, I have goals for the class, and then I'm asking them to make individual goals based on.
I saw the document you sent, which was awesome.
And I just decided this morning to actually tweak one of those goals because I realized that it didn't, like, some of the work that I'm doing doesn't really fit with that. So it's, like I said, it's an ongoing process. But anyway, like, I was thinking of having them meet and as a group, and like each group sort of talk about what success looks like for those goals. So that they would collaborate on, but they would set goals individually.
Okay.
I'm wondering for the first marking period, how important, I think it's very important to meet with them individually, but how do I do that in this crazy setup where it will all be virtual? Or do I try to, in the first marking period, do I do a little bit more group stuff and then just meet at the end? I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
I think that if you have kids that have established similar goals, it might make good sense for this first marking period, given the time, the amount of classes you have, how many students you have, and the fact that you're all virtual, to have groups of kids with similar goals who understand the same success criteria, having those conversations together, and then have them submit something in writing to you personally about, so that they don't have to necessarily acknowledge to the group where they feel they are.
That's what I was worried about. Like the sort of, there's a privacy to it as well.
Yep. So, I mean, I think that that's the way that we do it. We have a group conversation about what success looks like, have that be determinable so that they can go back to their own work and find evidence of the success they came up with.
Right.
And if they haven't met certain criteria, then when they're reflecting to give you that self-assessment, they can identify where they're going to be setting their next goals based on what they haven't met yet.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, because I think, like you said, they can learn a lot from each other. And if somebody in the group really can understand it and articulate it, it might help somebody who's having trouble with that. That's a great idea. All right.
And I mean, and then you can also reserve those one-on-one conferences for kids who really aren't getting it.
Right.
Either missing the boat completely, and there's always a small group of those that do, either because they're not invested or they just haven't been paying attention for whatever reason. I'm not disparaging the causes of such things, but it happens.
Right.
And I have to imagine in this environment too, if something's going on with the family and they're at home, there are a lot of other factors that could definitely hinder their ability to focus and really take in what they need to take in to do this effectively. So maybe then you siphon off that bottom three, the bottom 5% of kids who really need your help, and set up one-on-one conferences with them to start. And then that maybe you set up regular appointments with them, or set up a system where you're either doing like Flipgrid with them, where you could answer back and forth in video, or Voxer or something where it's voice, but it's still asynchronous and gives some flexibility with timing for both of you.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I do. I am worried because there are kids, because of this situation, who, I mean, most kids are doing okay, but there are some kids who have not really checked in since the beginning of school. And we're going to have a lot of different scenarios like that to kind of, and I'm wondering how that's going to be.
I just have to say, I wish my son, we elected to keep our son fully virtual. Like, we're hybrid in the district right now, but you were able to select over the summer if you wanted to keep your child home for until January, and then you could reassess and decide whether or not you wanted your child to go back. And I have been really, like, the teachers are struggling. They're not getting the support that they need. I do want to acknowledge that. And it's much better than it was in the spring when there was no accountability whatsoever. But he has some teachers flat out saying to them that they're paying attention to the kids sitting in front of them, not to the ones sitting online. And like, as a parent sitting in the other room, listening to him getting lectured at in his AP classes, and nothing, like, not even answering his questions or anything. Like, the fact that you're going above and beyond to really try to figure out what the issue is and how you could engage your kids in this model says so much about who you are as a teacher. And I hope the parents that you're working with really appreciate it.
That's nice of you to say. I don't want to pretend like I don't get frustrated with this.
Of course you get frustrated. But
it's like, how am I supposed to be in two places at once? But you're right. It's not the kid's fault if that's what it is. But we will have the same. We'll have some who will come in and some who will be completely virtual, but they're, on camera every day.
Right.
So it's going to be tricky, but we'll have to, make the best of it.
Well, I mean, if I could give you some advice from the parent end there,
I'll take
first of all, get a kid who's going to man your laptop so that when questions come in from kids at home, you don't have to keep looking, but somebody is the physical hand in class that says we have a question, so that those kids at home don't feel so isolated. I know that my son is frustrated a lot of times because he has questions and they're legitimate questions that aren't getting answered. And again, I'm not pointing fingers at the teachers. I know they're struggling and they're doing the best that they can, but that doesn't mean that my son should get a subpar education because his dad and I elected to keep him at home, all of the time instead of some of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. I think we will be using Zoom, and I have used the chat monitor in the past, so it seems like that's a keep in mind. And maybe I could rotate it so it doesn't get too tedious for one kid to do.
Also, like, if you haven't been using a hashtag already and creating some kind of Twitter back channel, that could be a secondary place where you have another kid kind of watching stuff. And it also will capture the conversation that's happening. I used to do that when we were fully in person for my more introverted students who didn't feel comfortable kind of raising their hands in class. It just gave them a voice, and it also gave them an opportunity while they were absent for whatever reason or on a trip, if they wanted to check in with what was going on in class that day. I often live streamed what was going on so nobody missed it.
Right. You were ahead of the game. Now we're all live streaming.
But I mean, I think when I didn't have to do it, but wanted to do it, it was one thing.
Right.
It's a whole other thing that you guys have to.
Have to figure out. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Is there anything else right now that's going on for you that I can help with, or?
I'm sure there are a million things. Like, what can I think of? I don't know. It's just we're the goal setting now. I mean, at the end, I was going to have at the end of the marking period, I was going to have everybody write a letter to sort of form where they were with their evidence so that they can pull it together. And I would read those ahead of time, but still, I think have that conference because I do think that's important. I don't know. Is there anything else that you think I could do? Like, I don't know. I'm not really articulating what I want to say. I'm just wondering if there's anything I'm missing. Like I'm having them weekly check in with their goals, but is there maybe a better way I could support that weekly check in?
So what I was doing with my journalism kids, because they were all doing something different, they had to set, like they maintained a weekly goal document where on Mondays they set their goals for, like they had their overarching goals, those were on the top, but they had daily and weekly goals as well. So in the 40-minute period together, they set goals at the beginning of the class. That was sort of like their do now, if you will, like today I'm working on this, this is what I want to accomplish and why. And then we wrapped up class the same way, giving them time to sort of reflect on how much of what they planned to do they actually did. And then at first I had them submitting it daily, but that was not sustainable. So I started collecting it weekly on Fridays. At the end of class on Friday, they submitted their weekly logs to me. And I was really good about putting very detailed feedback on it for like the first couple of months, and then they had gotten into a habit and it became more of like spot checking.
Right.
And I also had kids who were the class managers who were taking statuses of the class throughout the period and sort of coming to me if kids were off task and sort of saying, all right, Miss Saxton, these folks are saying what they're doing and they're actually doing it after a couple of rounds. And these are the folks who will probably need a little prodding.
That's a good idea because yeah, I definitely need help like with that because it's a lot. Like you said, like, I don't know. I was thinking, I don't know if I could keep up with weekly because I already have them handing in drafts weekly. It's just like, what, something's got to give. But I definitely think in the beginning, you're right. You do need to make the time for it and support it or it's not going to take.
My other suggestion is stagger your deadlines.
Right.
So that you're not collecting however many students at the same time. And if students finish early, encourage them to turn it in as soon as they're done and not wait for the deadline, so that, you could really give it the attention when there's less on your plate. That was something I actually got really good at was whenever they started documents, they shared it with me right away instead of when it was finished so that I could get in when I had time.
Right.
And just give them feedback immediately. Or if I saw that they were like way off track, I could catch it before it kind of went down to the point where they had no time left to fix it. And I felt that, if you have staggered deadlines where they're making their own deadlines, so to speak, and you could do that as well. Like, how long do you think this is going to take you to do? This is the hard deadline that I'm giving you, but I encourage you to set a pace that works better for you. Right. And then it'll be staggered and you'll have different amounts coming in at different times.
Right.
And you'll be
better at that.
Yeah. It'll be a little easier than getting all of it at once.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. I think because this year I got switched to all one grade level, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's helpful because I can wrap my head around really what I want to do, but I am struggling with that. Like I want to do the staggered deadlines, but I'm also kind of still being traditional and thinking in that way. So that's something I could definitely improve on.
Well, you could give them a range too.
Right.
And then that's another thing you could teach them to do is to develop a plan of action for a project based on their pace and their needs.
Right.
And then they could submit that plan of action to you so that you're following the deadlines they created for themselves inside of whatever the bigger unit deadline is.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know. I probably have 1,000 more questions, but I can't really think of anything right now. But I can't thank you enough. You've really helped me kind of see the big picture, because sometimes when you're in it, it's overwhelming.
It is. And you know what? I wish I could say to you that it gets so much. I mean, there are certain things that are going to get easier. Like some things will become more automatic, but you'll have days where you just think about how easy it is to do it the other way.
I've had
And it's like,
yeah.
and you're like, you know, right now it would be just so easy to put a 90 on this for no good reason, but because it'll just be done and they'll accept that answer. And, you know, It is easier. It's definitely easier to do it that way.
I've had those moments. It's like, well, it's, you know, like some of us are like the kids, and you know, it's worth it in the end. It just, I think, especially like you're saying in the beginning, getting in the routine, it's a lot of, you know, repetition and reminders. And I know just from my positive experience, like making a step in the right direction last year, I know it's going to work. So at least I have that. Like last year, just kind of like, what am I doing? Is this the right thing? So I know that the end result will be a positive one. It's just, you're right. There are moments where
and go easy on yourself in those moments, because they're gonna happen. And the more you struggle with yourself to try to come to terms with it, it just prolongs that process. Like feel it, let it, you know, like kind of let it pass over you, do whatever affirmations you need to do for yourself to kind of get yourself through it. And then don't judge yourself too harshly after the fact, because it'll pass.
Yeah, it's good advice.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, I think after the back to school series that we kind of put together, Isaac and I'm going to stop doing the Friday sessions because everybody's in school, and 11 is it's hard to be on there and really only talk to like one person live.
Yes.
So do you think if I moved it to the weekend or the afternoon, it would work better for people?
I think it could. I mean, I don't know. Weekends can be kind of crazy for people, up and down, but I would definitely join as much as I could.
Because I was thinking about doing it once a month now and having it be more like it was in the beginning, where I could take questions and have it be very specific to whatever folks are going through, instead of trying to anticipate those needs that I think now, once systems are in place, will variously diverge for just about everybody, depending on the makeup of what and where you're teaching.
I mean, I really look forward to them, because like you said, you have those moments of frustration, and then to get online and hear people talk about and ask questions about the same things I'm going through, I feel like validates what I'm doing and makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing, even though it's hard. So I do appreciate them.
I'm glad. I mean, we're certainly trying. I enjoy it. I mean, this is my passion work. And if there's anything I could do to help people do it better for the kids that they work with, and it's my pleasure to do that. So,
well, it's much appreciated.
I'm glad. Well, do you have anything fun planned?